Want to introduce our next speaker, and we have some very exciting news to share with all of you. I'd like to introduce you to Catherine Stratton. Catherine is a Moya Moya patient. She is a patient advocate, and she is very passionate about the patient partnership in research. With that, she recently completed her master's degree in chronic disease epidemiology at Yale. She's been working as a researcher in the past little bit, and she plans to commence her PhD in September. Her goal is to amplify the patient voices and work to see their priorities reflected in research. And that's exactly what she has been doing. She is a director of the Moya Moya Foundation and the chairperson of the research committee. And I am thrilled to introduce you all to Catherine, who has a great, exciting news to share with all of us. Catherine?
Well, thank you so much for that introduction, Lisa, and thank you so much for the speakers so far for your fantastic presentations. So I'm incredibly excited to share with you that today we are actually announcing the Global Moya Moya Patient Registry, or the GMPR. Just to reiterate, as Lisa had said, just in case some people are joining in now, my name is Catherine Stratton, and I do serve on the Moya Moya board as the chairperson of research. So a little bit of background on the foundation and sort of where the inspiration for this came. So the Moya Moya Foundation is a nonprofit 501c3 organization. And what is really special about our foundation is that the board is completely patient-facing. So it comprises of patients and family members of patients, which I think really gives us a very unique opportunity to identify priorities for patients, because, you know, we've really been through the experience ourselves and able to really speak to those needs. And so when I joined the board, both in terms of reflecting on some of my own experiences, but then of course in consultation with the board, we identified that right now there are some gaps in the availability of research or data to do research. Some of those gaps include lack of global data. We are very fortunate, you know, in North America, where all of our speakers are coming from, that there is really amazing research going on, but there's still some gaps in more global locations. And, you know, Moya Moya, as we know, does not discriminate. And so there is definitely research to be done in those regions. We also think that patient engagement is really critical and has been, you know, sort of missing in some of the research that's been going on. We also thought there were so many questions about patient experience, particularly with Moya Moya being a rare disease. There are just questions about that experience of being diagnosed with a rare disease and navigating that really are yet to be captured in the literature. And another gap is, you know, needing a larger pool of data to conduct research. So one of the challenges with rare disease is that, of course, there's only going to be so many patients at any given center, even if you are going to a center of excellence. And, you know, really being able to pool that all together gives you a much larger pool of data, and researchers then can come to conclusions with sort of more certainty, or, you know, what is called statistical power. So putting that all together, we decided we would create the Global Moya Moya Patient Registry to address those questions and needs. So what are the objectives specifically of the GMPR? So the first is collect global data on Moya Moya to capture regions that have been underrepresented to date. The second is to optimize data sharing and increase the data pool that is available to researchers. The third is to engage patients actively into Moya Moya research and identify their priorities for research. And also fourthly, to identify potential participants for future research studies that are more targeted and focused on specific issues. All right, so for people who might not be aware, what is a patient registry? So a patient registry is an organized system that uses observational study methods to collect uniform data, clinical or otherwise, to evaluate a specified outcome for a population defined by a particular disease. So in our case, that population for the particular disease, of course, is Moya Moya. And again, the benefit of having uniform data is that researchers can not have to go back and forth between different sources. It's all the same, which means that they can kind of analyze it all at once. There isn't as much of a risk of missing data where some patients were asked some questions at one center, but not other questions at another center. And just so you know, they are also referred to as clinical registries, clinical data registries, disease registries, or outcome registries, but they all mean the same thing. So what would an ideal registry do? So of course, the first part of a registry is just the collection of that data, so obtaining data and what's involved in that. So identify and enroll representative patients. So that means a lot of our listeners, so that we're hoping that you will register for the registry. Then we want to collect data from multiple sources. So again, one of the things that we're hoping to do with our registry is have questionnaires for the patients or caregivers themselves, but also questionnaires that you could opt into to have a physician complete, because there's going to be different expertise and different sort of priorities or backgrounds and knowledge sources that can be shared that way. As said before, use uniform data elements and definitions. And then, of course, maintain security and privacy. I'm going to be talking about that a little bit more later in the presentation. And then the second step, once you've obtained all of that data, there's dissemination, or to share that data back into the research and patient communities. So what's involved in that? So the first, of course, are generating patient and population level reports. So things like longitudinal reports to see, the progression, natural history of the disease, care gaps. Maybe we realize that, something like the time that it takes a moi-moi patient to be diagnosed is still kind of on the long side, but it's also worse in some regions. That would be an example of a care gap. Then send relevant notifications to providers and patients. Of course, we don't want the onus to be on you. We will be doing that, sending appropriate notifications and reminders. And then share information with patients and providers. Of course, everything that we learn through this registry, we want to share back with you so that you can be a more empowered and informed patient. And then lastly, populate potential patient subgroups. So, maybe from this registry, Dr. Lukovitz earlier was talking about contraception, and maybe he then would want to do a sub-analysis just among patients who have been pregnant, who completed the registry, and do an analysis within that subpopulation. So what types of information are we going to be collected? So I won't go through every single question because I think that would be a bit boring for you, but I can give an overview of the types of information. So the first, of course, are demographics. So those are things like age, sex, racial or ethnic background, etc. The second category are things that are, relevant medical history. So symptoms of moi-moi, history of associated conditions, your surgical history or stroke history. The third is going to be about recovery. So stroke rehabilitation, reintegration to school and work, any, prognosis. Do you have any residual effects following surgery? And then fourth, which is a bit special to our registry, questions about experiences with a rare disease. So questions like, were you ever misdiagnosed prior to receiving your moi-moi diagnosis? What was that diagnosis that you were first diagnosed with? How far do you have to travel for care to get to a center of excellence? These are just some of the things that people with much more common conditions don't really need to think about. All right, so where is this information, if you decide to participate, going to be stored? So the Moi-moi Foundation has partnered with Genetic Alliance and Luna DNA, who will house this data. And I've left the website names for you there if you wish to learn more about those organizations. But just to give a bit of background, why this venue and platform? So we actually considered several venues as a board, and then we selected to partner with Genetic Alliance, who has a working relationship with Luna DNA for several reasons. The first is that it's a nonprofit organization fully committed to patient engagement in research. We really wanted an organization that had that as a priority and had experience in patient partnership in research as opposed to a solely clinical and researcher sort of background. Second is that they have extensive experience in launching registries. Some of the other venues that we considered were a bit younger and maybe had only launched one or two. And thirdly, they're very supportive of global research collection, which, as you'll remember from the onset of the presentation, is one of our major priorities for this registry. So for example, the questionnaire that we've designed can be translated into several languages, making it much more accessible for global audiences. Now, what about privacy matters? You're probably thinking, well, how can I be assured that my information will be protected? So our agreement with Genetic Alliance has assured that everything that you volunteer or give the information is HIPAA compliant. For those who don't know, HIPAA is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, which is basically the act that is relevant to protecting health information and ensuring that it is kept confidential. Also, it would be good for you to know that as of right now, with the initial iteration of the registry, we're actually not collecting any HIPAA identifiers. So things like your name, address, social security, or the equivalent in your country, we're not collecting any of that. So you can actually be identified with participating. Also, all research being conducted through this registry will require approval from the Institutional Review Board, or the IRB, just as it would if you were, if a researcher was doing a study at a hospital or university. That what the Institutional Review Board is, it's a sort of independent review board who will basically look at, firstly, the ethics of a study to ensure that it's ethical, but also the practicality and sort of the merit to it to ensure that it really is necessary. And then based on its merit, it's approved or not. And all of the studies out of this will require that approval. Of course, informed consent will be obtained, and it will be done just before you commence the questionnaire. So you will be able to read in more detail about what's involved. You either consent and proceed, or of course you can decline and withdraw and not proceed. Only approved personnel will have access to this secure and anonymized information. And patients can withdraw, of course, at any time. And also what's great with this platform is that you can adjust your information. So if you do feel as though there's some major change to your history, maybe you've had an additional surgery, you can go back in and adjust that. All right, and what about patient facing? How can you be reassured that this is truly a patient facing registry? So firstly, patients will have the opportunity to share their priorities for research. We ask that directly in the questionnaire because at the end of this, we're going to have all of this amazing information, but there's so many things that you could do with the information, right? And so getting some guidance directly from patients will really be helpful in informing the types of studies that the research community decides to conduct. Also, registration is fully patient initiated. So, sometimes with some registries, like government registries, for example, the people that are reflected in that registry don't even know that they're in it, right? It's not really initiated by patients. Whereas with this registry, you, the patient, or caregivers on behalf of a patient would be the ones to decide, what, we really do want to participate in this and have the empowerment to join themselves. Thirdly, plain language summaries of research that is produced from the registry are going to be provided with the patient community so that you fully understand, what is coming out of this registry, and that that the time and energy that you committed is going to good use, and you can understand the findings that come from that. All right, so what is involved if you do decide to participate? So patients and caregivers on behalf of Moya Moya patients will be asked to complete a questionnaire covering the topics that I had mentioned earlier, and that's going to take approximately 30 minutes. And there will also be the opportunity to complete a second questionnaire, either on their own or by a physician researcher. Of course, with your consent, to better understand some of the medical complexities of your medical history that a physician might understand. As I said at the onset of the presentation, one of the qualities apparently of a very strong registry is getting information from multiple sources. So we think that partnership of one questionnaire for patients, one for physicians, will really optimize the collection of data here. Participants will be encouraged, but of course not required, to update their registry questionnaire responses on an annual basis if indicated. Of course, if there's nothing really different, no need, but if you think something has changed, that would be a great opportunity to update that. And lastly, participants will be asked if they agree to be contacted about future research studies that are designed in response to the registry. So again, if they decide, one of the researchers that we partner with decides that they want to do a trial of some sort, you're essentially deciding whether or not you consent to being contacted to participate in that as well. All right, so why join? So the GMPR is unique in a few regards. Of course, the global scope, the fact that it is patient-facing, and that it's comprehensive. Often as patients, we have to complete so many different questionnaires, and each one is only on one little topic, whereas what we really tried was to make this very comprehensive so that you would only have to complete, this one questionnaire. Registries also really help to optimize data sharing for rare diseases in particular. And how does it do that? Well, the fact that it's patient initiated, so you don't have to wait for a center of excellence to partner with us. You, the patient, can sign up. Also, it will be multi-centered. So instead of research being done out of single centers, we're going to have all of this research being put together. And also, because we're doing this across the life course, there will be combined pediatric and adult information. And the third reason to join is, actively participate in Moya Moya research. So the registry will really give you up-to-date information on Moya Moya, and also have the opportunity to participate in future research studies. And so really be a part of ongoing research that we know from our presenters earlier is so critical in Moya Moya. So how to join? We're going to share a direct link to the interface, which will look just like this. This is a screenshot from sort of the template that we have right now. And there will be a few ways to join. As I said, individuals can join themselves, but also patients who are receiving care at participating hospitals may be approached about joining by a clinician or researcher there. Okay, so let's say I'm interested. What's next? How do I join? So if you have not already, please do sign up for our newsletter. You can do that at our website, or contact Dean Houle, the president, or Lisa Deck, chairperson of communications. Also check our website for updates. We have a page directly committed to the registry and any updates pertaining to that. Follow us on social media. So of course, there are the common Facebook support groups, but the foundation also has their own social media. So Moya Moya Foundation on Facebook, Twitter is at Moya Moya FDN, Instagram is at Moya Moya Foundation. And do look at all of these sources for announcements about when registration will open, but also about tutorials, because the foundation is going to host some tutorials so that people feel comfortable using that interface and entering their own data. If you have questions or concerns pertaining to the registry or want to talk anything through before joining, feel free, of course, to email me. My email is there, or Roxanne Houle, who is another member of the board. And I just want to thank you so very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Catherine. This is really an exciting step for the Moya Moya community and having this registry. And I know that you and many others have put hours into creating this. And so I really, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for this, because I know this is just a first step in looking at collecting information and really continuing research. So thank you. So now